Hello, I'm FXToyCat, and would you like to watch grass grow for 40 minutes? I think you would, but you know what's way better than watching grass grow? Watching grass grow in the Nether, which is something I never thought I'd have to try and do, but recently I've been terraforming my Nether, and as part of that, I've been trying to grow some grass there. So today, let's watch the grass grow for 40 minutes, and over the top of that, because we could leave it, you can mute me right now if you want to watch the grass, you want to watch this in its pure beauty, but if you want to hear about the fact that, oh yeah, I realized that in the Nether, there's no natural light source, so you have to place torches if you want the light to grow. Embarrassing mistake to make, but if you want to hear about that and the usual podcast with ToyCat, then that's all we'll be doing today, because this is a live stream replacement Thursday, and we're just going to dive straight into it, dive right into the most important issues that you can discuss, because breakfast questions are always front and center on this channel. So let's just dive straight into the big divisive issue. Let's talk about breakfast fantasies. And you might be saying, ToyCat, breakfast fantasies? That's an absurd sentence to make, but you know what I'm talking about when I say breakfast fantasies. There are attractive breakfasts and there are sad breakfasts for people in a hurry. There are the breakfasts that you dream after. There are the breakfast buffets you look at and you go, yes, that's the breakfast I aspire to have one day. And there are the breakfasts like, oh, here is a piece of bread I rolled around, I don't know, like an egg or something, and I've called it, or a tomato or whatever you're gonna do, and I've called that a breakfast. There are sad breakfasts, there are good breakfasts, and there are mediocre breakfasts, you know, your average breakfast like cereal or something, and that is just a fact. And you might be thinking, no, ToyCat, I don't fantasize about breakfast. Breakfast is a very practical thing for me. I just eat it in the morning and then I live my life. My life is the fantasy, and you're wrong. Breakfast is the real fantasy here. But let me explain to you, even if you don't think about sad breakfast, good breakfasts, and medium breakfast, let's talk about the thing that you probably do think about, which is the fantasy surrounding breakfast. And again, sounds absurd on the surface, but think of it this way. The first person to invent toast, or like to invent a toaster, basically, you know, the modern day creator of toast, he was probably a racist man. He was probably, you know, sexist or whatever, and he probably didn't wash his hands after using the bath. And if it was 2019, we'd all be boycotting toast like, oh, this man, he said some problematic comments, so let's not eat toast, guys. But fortunately, we don't know who made toast. We had no idea who created beans on toast, the toasty. We don't know how many of these great breakfasts came about. And actually, not side note, because as we all know, a podcast of ToyCat always has to include a top 5. So top 5 toast recipes, let's go. Cheese on toast has to be number 1, right? Like, I'm a big believer in cheese on toast, especially if there's more cheese than bread. I really like cheese. It's like pretty bad for you, but honestly, the texture of like melted cheese, kind of hot cheese, is good enough for me. Like having, you know, cold cheese on bread, that's kind of sad. Having warm cheese on bread, that's a breakfast you aspire after. That's why that is number 5 on our list. Number 4 on our breakfast list is going to be the tuna toasty. And toasty is arguably not toast, right? There's a bit of a different process. You're meant to squish it together real good. But if you have never had a tuna toasty, it's a solid breakfast. Like, tuna just works in the morning. It works, especially if you throw some cheese in there too. But tuna toasties, really good as well. Not as good as the ham toasty though. The ham toasty is such a classic. Again, I don't know how big ham toasties are. I think it might be called a grilled cheese in America, but with ham, I guess. But yeah, my understanding is a ham toasty, 2 bits of bread, some cheese, some ham, throw it in one of those machines that makes it triangles, or even just like toast the slices and then squish it together with your hands. I don't know how easy it is to make otherwise, but one of those is one of the best breakfasts, and it's so easy to make because ham is cheap, right? You can buy like 10 slices for less than £1. Cheese is potentially cheap, and bread is really cheap, so it's the sort of meal that you can make for like 16 pence or like 20 cents or something like that. And the fact that it's so cheap and so good, it gets that value spot on the list. But you know what's better than a ham toasty? Cheese on toast again. You know, number 2 spot's gonna be cheese on toast, but remove that bottom bit of toast, throw some pizza there, because honestly, as far as I'm concerned, pizza, bread, and cheese would be the perfect kind of breakfast. Like, just actually, fun fact here, it's worth mentioning that pizza is a healthier breakfast than cereal. A lot of people think like, oh no, pizza is really bad for you, so I won't eat it for breakfast. Pizza is actually healthier than cereal. It's like a similar caloric content, but there's you know, the calories you do get from pizza are generally more protein based, whereas when you have cereal, there's a lot of sugar and carbohydrate. You know, pro tip here, eat pizza for breakfast. It's healthier than cereal. Obviously, you should eat something healthier than both, but like, we make bad breakfast decisions anyway. Why not make a, you know, a slightly better one and eat pizza for breakfast? But you know what number 1 is here? This is the controversial one. This is what I've been building up into. This is where the mass unsubscribe button gets hit, because I think perfect black toast is my favorite type. Everyone's seen that graph, right, of like all the different ways you can have you know, toast from A to 9 and from 9 to G, or I got that all wrong, but you get the point. Like, all the different types of toast. Perfect black toast where it's pretty much black all the way through. Like, it's black on top but not black in the middle. It's like a rare steak, or yeah, a medium rare steak, where it's charred on the outside but it's perfectly normal on the inside. That is the perfect toast. I love crispiness. A lot of people don't appreciate a good piece of burn-in toast, But my favorite number one breakfast is a perfectly burnt slice of toast. And I know, saying it's burnt is silly. Let's call it black toast. Let's rebrand this stuff. Because the person who invented black toast was probably a racist too. And I sometimes wonder, like, you know, if we did know about them, would that change things? Because, you know, we know that the person who invented cereal, like, I don't know if this is slander, so a certain type of flake that is named after a certain type of corn, the man who's behind all of that huge cereal brand, he was known that he invented cereal as a way to, like, he's got some very messed up views on children and sexuality. And, you know, look into it sometime. It's not just like, oh yeah, he's a racist. He's a racist pedophile, basically. I mean, like, not entirely, but, like, basically, right? It's a real thing you can look into. And, yeah, so the reason I'm talking about racist pedophiles today is because of the fact that we're growing grass in the Nether, which, if you think about it, is something that makes just as much sense as being a racist. Because, like, even if you had the choice, even if the society was like, yeah, we'll give you a pass, you can be racist as much as you like, you can be a pedophile as much as you like, would you take people up on that? You wouldn't, right? You have to not only disregard the societal norms, the legal consequences, you have to do something that's really ridiculous, and in some ways isn't the only way to fight against that, to do something ridiculous, but to do it with no real cause, to do it for the purpose of some greatness. Like, has anyone ever terraformed the Nether? It actually might be done before, but it's something I wanted to do because I really wanted to prove that this is a good thing that's kind of possible. Also, you'll notice during the background gameplay, I spent 7 hours recording this, and there's like a 20-minute timeout screen, so every now and then the screen goes a bit dark, but it's fine. We'll pretend that's not the case, and instead we'll go back into talking about burnt food, because again, a lot of people are very anti-burnt food, and I understand why. Like, generally speaking, I prefer most food not burnt. However, there is like this perfect level of what some people would call a burnt on a food that is much better. Like, there are many foods that taste better when burnt, because, you know, you might say that's an oxymoron. Like, burnt is just ruining food, but think about the opposite, right? Raw sounds like a bad way to cook food, but al dente pasta, al dente noodles and pasta that are slightly undercooked, again, the word is al dente because we're fancy and we use Italian words for this sort of thing, that's just slightly raw pasta. Cheese is amazing when it's burned. Steak is amazing when it's burned. Any sauce, if you like warm it up and get it going crazy, you can do some amazing stuff. If you don't believe that steak is better when it's burned, because again, I mentioned I like, you know, something medium rare steaks, like, you know, kind of like pinky on the inside. But in case you're like, well, that's kind of crazy, Toycat, I don't know if I agree with that whatsoever, then how about I mention the fact that, think about like a burger or something with those flame grilled, you know, those char grilled marks on them. Those char grilled marks are tasty. We all agree, right? Charred is good, burnt is good. I could go on forever, and maybe I could, maybe I should even, but we're not going to. Instead, we're gonna move into the existential question that steak really raises, because, you know, steak discussions are ones I like to have. It's honestly, I don't think I ever had steak until I was like 18. Like, I must have had it at some points, but it was just generic, like, oh, that's a type of meat, I guess. Like, it was cooked at home. I think it was well done. Like, I remember steak being a very tough meat to eat. Like, oh man, that, like, your knife can't do anything to a well-cooked steak, right? Like, a well, I think it's called well done. A well done steak is so impossible to do something with, because it's just a slab of stone that is that was a cow at some point probably in the past. But yeah, like, the interesting thing about steak as opposed to every other food is the kind of concept that it does, the more you spend on it, the better it gets, with almost no upper ceiling. Like, in my head, I think I know the upper ceiling because I've spent a lot of different amounts on steak, but most foods, like if you think about pasta, the best pasta you can buy is less than like £1 or $1 for a kilogram. If you think about eggs, the best eggs you can buy, they're going to be like 20, 30p cents, euro cents, whatever you think about. Like, it's really, really cheap to buy the best pasta, the best eggs, the best milk, the best of so many different things. Even if you're thinking like really brand specific stuff, like the best pre-made curry sauce, the best pre-made meals even, like that you can buy, like Iceland pizza, best pizza costs £2.49. There are so many things you can buy the best stuff for really fairly low prices, because food prices are crazy low. If you don't know, like, one of the things that it seems like it's always going up is like, oh, food is getting more expensive, right? No, the truth is, food is actually not getting more expensive. One of the few things that is consistently cheaper relative to everything else in your life is food. Like, obviously the price goes up sometimes because the world is inflating, but they go up lower than inflation, and they sometimes go down for a lot of items that you just assume like, oh, it's just a sale. No, food is going down generally speaking, or at least it's not going up as fast as inflation, unless you live in some crazy war-torn part of the world where food is under short supply. There is more food than ever before, and even the very best food, besides its few select categories, is pretty cheap. Like, you can do all your shopping at the highest end grocery store in your area, and it's not going to break anyone's bank, right? These aren't big purchases, despite the fact that there are so many different inputs and outputs going into what you're buying, and that's really cool in my opinion. But when it comes to the meat game, that all goes away. Like, again, when I was a kid and I made all my decisions, it's like, oh wow, yeah, you can do anything. But then when it comes to meat, everything's expensive. Like, even chickens, which are really cheap meat, like, it's still steep. But if you want to buy like some pig or some like some lamb, it's pretty steep if you want to buy a decent amount of that to make a meal out of. But steak is on its whole own level where like you can spend more and more on a steak and you'll usually always get a better, like always increasing in quality steak, right? It's almost impossible not to get a better steak than the one you have. There's this like big, almost, I want to say like societal level issue with the fact that like you can always spend more on a steak and always get a better steak. So think about it this way. Steak is something you can get good or bad in any circumstance. You can get a $3 steak, but also you can get a $300 steak, and there are real perceptible differences between them and every single tier in between. And although usually I don't talk about steak for 10 minutes, it's the Toy Cat podcast. We do what we like here. You think that I'm bound by your obligations? You can leave if you'd like to. But assuming you don't, let me tell you something that I've kind of like, I spent a lot of time trying to work this out, because one of the things my brain just does, I always try to like solve these issues mentally. So like one day if I become king dictator, I can fix some parts of the world. So I bought a lot of steaks at a lot of different price points. I think the cheapest steak I bought was just under £2, and the most expensive steak I bought was, I think it was converted to pounds would be just over 200. So we're talking just under $300 for a single steak versus just under $2 for so just under $3 for a steak. $3 to $300. And I've also tried steaks that would be like, I guess, $10, steaks that would be about $15, steaks that would be about $40, about $60. I think I had one in America, like, so it would have been literal dollars. It was 100 before tax, but like after tax and tips, it was 140 or something. So that is my range of steaks. I have a huge range of steak experience now, and I can tell you with all of that range, there's just this thing where it always gets, it seems at least better. Like the very best beef in the world, which is roughly at 300. You can obviously get it gold plated and go higher, but it's interesting because the very best steak in the world, it's so good, it's so fatty, it's so, I think it's horrific for you because it's just fat and meat and marbling and like, and salt and all the condiments you're putting on it, wasabi sometimes. It's a really, really, really solid piece of meat that you're putting in your mouth, and that is a concerning quote to have on the record. But like you can full on taste like all of these different, this amazing just like thing that's happening, and maybe it's like a dude thing, like a guy thing, like maybe there's just some part of me that's like, oh yeah, well people say that they like steaks and therefore I do too. It might be like a societal pressure thing, like the same reason that, you know, like there are certain things assigned to these people and to those people. Maybe that's the same reason that I'm just like, oh yeah, I must like good steak, and therefore when I try a steak that I think is going to be good, it is good. It's possible that's the case, but I really don't think it is, because I can taste all the price tiers in between. We're like, oh yeah, the one that was 100 was like amazing on every level, like every bite was something I savored, whereas the one that's like $7, it's like, oh yeah, this bite is beef, it's beef, all right. It's pretty good beef when you put it in a sauce. And I was really hungry when I had it, and I was like, yeah, this is above average beef, maybe. You know, like, and then when you have the tiers in between, it's like, oh, this is a solid steak. I would have this again. It's not the best steak I've had in my life, but it's a thing I would go through. So like, there is a real tier game, and the fact that like, oh yeah, if you're willing to spend 100 times more on steak, you're getting an objectively better product. Is that like a tragedy for society? Because the cool thing I've always thought, that a lot of people have issue with when you say the phrase equality in regards to income, or like in regards to wealth, let's say, people are like, oh, that's so bad. But I mean, is it so bad if this person who earns 100 times more lives the exact same life? Like, is there a different, you know, like, is it the quality of life you care about, or is it the fact that, you know, there is 100 times more of this unit which some people use to measure their value by? Is that the issue, or is it the fact that, oh, if you have 100 times more of this unit people use to value themselves by, then you can start buying nice watches and you can buy better, you know, better food or better whatever? Like, which concerns you more, the conditions that you get to live in, the life that you get to live as a result, or the number itself? And if it's the life you get to live, then the cool thing is like, everyone is getting closer together in that regard. I've wanted to speak about this for a while in a second channel video, but to give you the kind of cliff notes, every single service is getting more accessible to more people. Sometimes it's in different ways, but like an example would be, for instance, I buy a lot of plane tickets because, you know, I'm in planes a lot. Like, you might know that as this video goes live, there's like a 1 in 5 chance I'm in a plane. I don't know how time conversions work to Taiwan time, but I might be in a plane, is even you watch this. But so the thing about airline prices is they are really, really, really variable in 2019. The same person on your same plane can be paying like 5 times as much as you, and that means that people who are willing to pay more will pay more for the tickets sometimes. And that's to do with the fact that, like, oh, they try and work out, like, oh, if you're booking this far in advance, then you get cheaper tickets because you're doing this sort of thing. But the fact that, like, so many people can get different prices for the same thing, that's kind of cool to me. It means you pay It's that dream that a lot of people have where like, oh yeah, you pay what you can and you take what you get. Everyone has the same product and everyone pays in what they can. You know, it's what people dream from either church or from government or from everywhere else. And it's kind of cool that like that's how so many forms of transport work. That's how so many services in general work, like hotels, everything in the travel business, because tourism is such a luxury good. But like the fact that luxury goods like that are accessible to everyone. Think about phones. Like everyone has high-end phones. Like phone, you know, so a $1,000 or £1,000 product should be a symbol of like, man, you just blew 1,000 on one thing that you use, you know, for a few hours a day that really the quality of doesn't matter. You know, when you buy an iPhone XS, it's a status symbol. It's not a symbol of like, oh yeah, so I wanted a little bit faster processing power. I think the A12 chip is really going to do that for me. And you know, they increased the camera sensor size by a few megapixels. That should help when I FaceTime my dog. My dog should be able to see me in slightly higher quality. No one's thinking that. They're thinking I have the newest, shiniest iPhone. It's a part of the status brand. It's like when you buy new clothes, like, or when you wear a suit, or when you wear like a nice jacket. Like the difference between smart and casual is when you're dressing smart, you want people to think you're looking nice, and it drives into your perception of yourself. And it's the same when you buy an iPhone. Same with, I guess, a high-end Android phone, like the S10 or whatever. Like flagship phones, the really, really high-end ones. Some people want them from the tech. There are tech heads out there, but most people, especially, this is heavier on the Apple side because Apple is such a premium brand. Like, they literally charge you 3 times what it costs them to build a product, and people are fine paying that. They're one of the few companies in the world where they can say, here's $300 worth of materials, and people will go like, yep, that is worth $1,100. And in some cases, it's a lot more, right? Because most people buy their phones on contract over like 12 or 24 months, where they have huge payments, but they also get, you know, there's this whole like trade-off involved there. But the fact that you're paying like sometimes closer to $2,000, there are phones that cost $2,000 as well. You're doing it so you can be like, hey, this is my thing. And it's something I've always found odd, because I've never been like big into the idea of status symbols. Like, I don't generally want to be judged by my possessions, because I think my possessions are like, to some extent, my possessions weigh me down. Like, the number of things I own is a list I would like to make shorter or keep the exact same at all times. The idea that like, oh yeah, this list of possessions, this group of things I've collected in my life, these are the things that people should value. I mean, it's nice because on that same level, like, oh, when I die, all the value I've created in my life will remain. But I also think like, nah, if you like me, I prefer you like me for my opinions. If you've been watching this channel this whole time, like, you know, Toycat says some pretty ridiculous things. What did he say just back then about like, he said that, you know, equality wasn't necessarily the only thing you should drive for in the world. Wow, I disagree with that. But on the other hand, I have seen his phone. It's a OnePlus 6, and he's gonna get one of those Zen phones soon. That's a nice phone. Also, he owns an Xbox One X. That's an expensive console. It was actually given me for free a long time ago because of some weird. Pretty much every YouTuber has an Xbox One, got it for free from Microsoft. There's a fun story I could talk about that. Xbox One X, I should say, the original one I bought myself. But if you actually do, you know, value someone more just because of their stuff, that's not what I ever want in the world. And you might say like, well, no one's actually thinking that, but some people are subconsciously thinking it, right? A lot of people. You know, like, I haven't experienced this because in the UK, fortunately, we have school uniforms, but, like, people would bully, you know, like, judge the poor kids, judge the rich kids by their school uniform. Even in schools here, where there's no uniform, you could bring your own bag. There were always bags that were identified as cool and trendy, like, they were super expensive, and they would just be like, yeah, I bought the nice bag, are you not going to buy one too? Like, within the chavs, I don't know if that's a widely known term outside the UK, but within the messed up, you know, the kids who are in trouble a lot of the time, they all needed this bag, and then if one couldn't get them, it was like, oh, you poor, you can't get one of these? They'd make fun of each other for it. Like, people use physical possessions as a way to judge things sometimes, and people often buy possessions they can't afford, because, you know, like, the crazy thing about the modern era that wasn't really true in past, and again, maybe this is good, but you can buy things regardless of your current access to money, because everyone can get very easy access to credit. The only question on, like, credit is, like, how expensive is that credit? And the less able you are to pay the credit, the more expensive it is, which sounds like an unfair system, but obviously it's because you're more likely to default. The reasons there are just, but it means that, like, oh yeah, you can buy anything at any time. It's just the question of you'll pay more if you want it before you can pay for the thing. And that to me is like the real cycle of pain in our current life. Like saying like, oh no, this person's $300 stakes, this person has $3 stakes. I don't think that's actually a significant issue. Like it presents the start of an issue, but I think the bigger part of the issue is the fact that like, oh, the reverse seems to happen. Even though the same prices are offered to everyone, in reality, a lot of people will choose to pay different prices. If you choose to, you know, for an example, if you choose to buy a $1,000 phone outright, then it's $1,000. If you choose to buy it and then you pay, let's say, 20% interest over the year, it's $1,200. If you choose to buy it on a contract where you pay over 24 months, then it's a zero down deal, and you do this and this, and you build in the cost over those 24 months with a higher cost at the end, then it's closer to 2,000. You can see how, like, that sounds like a real issue, actually. Like, the same status symbol, which really people shouldn't be after. Like, I can easily say from the side here, like, why spend $2,000 on something that's 1,000? I can look at this and say that from the side, like, what a crazy thing. But the fact that that's something people desire and want is something, I think that is one of the real fundamental flaws. Like, I don't even know how you fix it. Like, there's no easy one solution that isn't tyrannical. And yeah, it's something, if you're watching this right now, you have like a easy solution. You can fix it for yourself very easily, right? Like, oh, so I'll try and do the opposite of, spending on credit. I'll try and save and be my own bank. Because there are two sides of interest you can be on. Like the one, again, I love like a tiny bit of like finance here, finance there. The one piece of advice that's like, okay, if you want to make the biggest difference in your life between how much money you make and get to spend over the course of your life, because, people want to be richer the older they get, generally. That's how trends have worked for the longest time. If you want to be on the right side of interest, all you've got to know is that there are two ways that money can work. Money can work against you and money can work for you. If we say, for example, you earn $100 a month and you want something that is $1,000, if you, pay $50 a month on a, some form of credit, then you'll pay more than the thing is worth, like $1,200, because you pay interest at the end. But if you put that $50, it'd have to actually be in index trackers, because right now, worldwide interest rates are crazy low. Like, bank accounts won't give you anything. But if you invest that in some way, let's say you get your 8% a year or whatever, then suddenly, you are paying less than $1,000 because your money earned more money along the way. And that's the point about interest. Like, oh, you can be on the side where people make interest on you, or you can make interest on the world, whether it's the markets, whether it's the global markets. Like, there are many different things that need investment, like different companies. There are many places that you can throw money that it multiplies, because, that's how capital, society, that's what capitalism is. Fun fact. But yeah, I don't know. That's the one lesson I want to get out of the way here. I feel like we've gone too far into finance, which isn't a fun topic. Like, money is a thing we all have very different, slightly amounts of, and some people think that's a bigger deal than other people, and some people think it should be more unevenly distributed. Some people think it should be perfectly distributed. Some people think that, like, oh, isn't it kind of weird that we all have different amounts despite the fact that we're all equally exhausted? There's all different questions about where money comes from, what it means, and stuff like that. And I can kind of understand where the rule of, like, don't talk about money comes from, but I also think it's a toxic, bad rule. So talk about money. Let's acknowledge what the status quo is, because I think understanding the current situation in any issue will always help you in the future. Like, if you want to be like, oh yeah, I think there's a really seriously bad situation in Cambodia right now. I don't know why I brought up Cambodia twice this week, but there's a bad situation in Cambodia right now. How do we fix this? Oh, well, the current guy in charge, he's a real bad fella. But then you're like, oh, it actually turns out he got rid of the worst person before him. He's the compromise candidate. It's like, oh, okay, well, that complicates things a little bit, right? That makes you think like, okay, so that's clearly not the solution to this issue. Maybe we need to work out something else. And that's how you get the smarter solutions. The thing that worries me about certain arguments made these days, because there's so many big debates that are happening all the time, constantly. There's never really a pause to these debates. There are just two sides arguing against each other, but they're not even arguing at each other. They're arguing indirectly about, that's the internet. People yell at each other all day about issues that really don't have a easy resolution, or really perhaps don't even have a resolution at all. There's a lot of examples of this one, but I want to talk about one specifically because, again, I really like to use this platform to explain some of the things that because some people who are watching this are the same age I was when I started YouTube, when I was in the age of like doing all these different online jobs to try and scrape together something that I could use to afford a laptop that I could eventually use to start writing, which I could then start eventually using to start YouTube. Like, there was a whole process to even begin this whole thing that I do right now. And maybe in that same situation for whatever your dream is, like, you feel like there are a lot of steps between you and it, and it's always scary when that's a thing that happens, especially if you work in a field that's YouTube's a rare field, but also like art. How do you become a professional artist? It's real hard, right? Like, become an art teacher, I guess. But besides that, it's a hard field to make it in, right? So if you're in one of these fields where it's really tricky, I wanted to go through some controversial thought with Toy Cat time, because I want to give you guys some good advice. If you watch this channel, I care about you slightly more than people who don't watch this channel, because humans by nature seem to have this like in-group, out-group thing, and even no matter how much you try to avoid it, I do think if you watch this channel, at least if you watch this video, you know, you're a subscriber, you seem to like me, I like you more, maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't, but I care more about you, I care more about your ideas than about the general populace. So here is some advice that I think is really important, because online, one of the biggest debates, and the young person argument is you should never work for free. That's literal slavery. You know, like internships, if working for free means that people who have more money, you know, people come from rich families, which isn't me, I always want to clarify this, but like, my family is literally, you know, my grandparents are literally you know, one of them's a laborer and one of them's an immigrant who came here from Sri Lanka. So I guess I'm technically a second generation immigrant in some ways. I mean, I'm not sure. I guess I'm a half-blood second generation immigrant, but I'm not sure if that counts as half. But you get the point where it's like, okay, that's a bit of a weird, confusing thing. But yeah, just keep that in mind, that I'm not saying this because like, yeah, I think everyone should work for free because I'm on pro-rich kids who can afford to work for free. No, yeah, it sucks that like, oh yeah, internships, especially at large companies, so you work for free, and then that basically allows them to hire only people who can work for free, which is people who have parents or someone in their life to support them, which sucks because, you know, if you don't come from a supportive family, you don't get to do that sort of thing. And I definitely agree that like, especially if it's a big corporation, sure, people, they should pay their younger workers, they should make that investment just to guarantee that they have a higher, like, it's a smart investment because it means you get the full talent pool. You always want to guarantee you get the smartest, the best, the most qualified, whoever it is, when you want a role and you don't know specifically who you want for it. Like, when you're making a new Iron Man movie, you want Robert Downey Jr. I guess you don't anymore, post-Marvel. Well, you don't. That ruins my theory. When you're making a new Spider-Man movie, you want the guy who plays Spider-Man. He's a funny fella. You want him. You don't think like, well, let's do an audition for this. No, you're like, he's the guy. But for most other things where you're like, okay, we're making a new Game of Thrones series, we need an actor to play the main character, then you go out, you want to find the best Ned Stark there is in the world. When you're you know, an accountancy firm and you need a new junior accountant to manage the books, you need the best junior book manager in the world, ideally. I mean, it's going to be hard to find. But the way you best find that is by having the best talent pool. If you're a large corporation and you can afford to pay everyone, always do. The idea of like, you're $1 trillion or $1 billion company, but also you have to have interns work for free for you, that's a ridiculous thing, right? That's penny pinching on a level that doesn't even make sense. As a business thing, in my opinion. But also, I never join in the arguments that every time you get paid, every time you do a job, you should always be paid. I don't think that there should be no such thing as free work, or, you know, there's a whole subreddit dedicated to hating work for exposure, you know, choosing beggars, and they always, you know, make fun of people who are giving ridiculous exposure. Yeah, if you're not getting good exposure, don't get paid. In the same way, someone can offer to pay you in money, but give you 6 cents. It's not offering to be, you know, that's not the same as being paid $6,000 for something, because 6 cents and $6 are a different amount of money. And in the same way, you shouldn't work for a shout out for a dude with 12 followers on Instagram. Probably like not a shout out in general, but there are situations where you should work for, you know, exposure, big air quotes, or rather you should work for experience, I think is a much better term. And again, this is a controversial thing. A lot of people are going to hear this and say, no, why should I work for free? Why should anyone ever work for free? There's even a Minecraft developer who's on record saying, no, you should never work for free. You should never work for less than $20 an hour if you're a freelancer, for example. Never go under that. But the interesting thing is I used to agree with both those things. As an abstract concept, always value yourself higher, right? You should never value yourself less than that. You should never value yourself as worth nothing. But I once spoke to a university professor in a formerly communist country. It was Slovenia, in case you're curious. It's a really nice country. I really like Slovenia. I like Ljubljana a lot. Would recommend it if you're in Europe and want a weird, underrated European city. Ljubljana. I'm a big fan of the city. I'm a bit mixed on the name because it's hard to say, but whatever, you get the point. I was speaking to a guy who in the city, and he was a full-blown libertarian who liked debating English people for some reason. I think back to it now, and even though he said he was a university professor, I wonder, like, was he really, or does he just say that to speak to strangers? But either way, I spoke to a full-blown libertarian from you know, the former Yugoslavia. He was around in the country when it fell, and we had a big conversation about a lot of things, like, oh, this, that, something politics, and then we had a bit of a debate about the problem with the minimum wage, because minimum wage, again, just by default, I'm always down for it. Like, right, there should be a minimum wage, because even though the economic side of me says, well, if you have a minimum wage, you're just saying people who are worth less than that don't get paid. But the reality is, if you look at any jobs market, it doesn't seem to work that way. It's the same thing as I was saying about big corporations and the, you know, paying people nothing. Most big corporations will just be like, okay, we'll pay people a little bit more, even if it's more than they're worth, air quotes. You know, a lot of big corporations aren't paying people what they're worth. They're paying people the minimum they can get away with because they know there are more people who can fill the position. You know, there's a real issue that comes with like big corporations of the way they handle people, because they're not trying to improve people and get their skills going. You know, there's a whole discussion we could have there, but we're not not having that discussion. Let's talk about the minimum wage, because he mentioned something like, oh yeah, so it basically makes it illegal to work for less than minimum wage. That's the whole point of it, right? If it wasn't, that's why it's called a minimum wage. But then that means that if you want to work somewhere really bad and you know you're worth less than the minimum wage to these people, it means it's illegal for you to ask for less than it. You can't be like, I'm only really worth £4 now. You know, we could start there, then increase it over time. It's like you work for free or you work for minimum wage. Those are the two things that most societies allow you to do. And so I was like, yeah, well, I mean, of course that's a thing, but they can just, you know, I went back into my current argument, and he said something like, oh yeah, well, have you ever worked for less? And I was like, yeah, actually, I've done a lot of jobs. And then I thought back to all of the jobs, and I was never paid minimum wage. Like when I was a writer, because I said before, the way I paid for YouTube, all the equipment I needed, like it was like $400 or $500 worth, is I did a lot of writing on various games websites. You know, I was a writer at age like 14, 15. I didn't get pocket money. I had to, you know, work out my own source money. And if I didn't have a way to work for, again, which I now know is less than minimum wage, I wouldn't have been able to do that sort of thing. I would have got the experience, which, or, you know, regardless of the money, which actually was useful, I would have got the experience, which has made me, I would say, much better at writing than I was before. You know, I've written a few books for Amazon. They're not perfect, but I think that they're things people like. They seem to be at the very least, if Amazon sales are a impression to go by. So yeah, it's a thing that it gave me some skills. And in the same way, like I worked this YouTube channel, if work is the term for it, but you know, like I didn't get paid any decent amount of money for the first few years I did this. Going for less than minimum wage always sounds like, oh, but that's the minimum, you know, like, and it literally legally is, unless there's some way you're a contractor or self-employed, because, you know, I'm not an employee of YouTube. Like, they can delete me, and there's no statutory rights, you know, they don't have to pay for me if I want to go on holiday, or any of these other rights you get with a working company, because I'm not working for them. I work for myself, and they are a source of revenue that allows me to work myself. And yeah, I really started to think about this, and it was like, yeah, actually, every single thing I've done was worth significantly less than the minimum wage in the jurisdiction I was working. I did most of my work, I guess, for Americans and American companies, and I was technically breaking the law to do so. And here's the thing, if I'd have tried to charge, you know, like $15 to $20 an hour, like what people say is the minimum you should ever charge for an hour, a lot of people wouldn't have taken my stuff, or would have, you know, demanded like, you know, you do this again, or they wouldn't have worked with me again, because they'd be like, this isn't $15 to $20 worth of content you've made here. I was making, you know, kind of rough stuff that was really rough around the edges. I had a lot of feedback that helped me improve and get better as I went along. I slowly started increasing the amount I charged, and that was something I did as I got more talented at the thing. And yeah, but the reason I'm saying all of this, the reason I'm giving you my whole story, is because obviously I'm a weird exception case here. I was a teenager with no access to money. Most people are not in that spot, and you know, I had some goals. I was very driven towards them. You know, maybe I'm a rare case scenario, but I want to say this right now for everyone listening to this. The reason I've told you my whole story, the reason I told you about the professor from the former communist country, the reason I told you about why I did all that work to get to where I am right here on YouTube, is because I want to get the message out there to you that if you're in a field where like you need, you know, it's a rare chance for success, then jumping at any chance you get to even get connected with the right people, or even just increase your skills so that you are the best person for the job, is something that's really important. And I have a story from the other side, actually, because, you know, like a long time ago, when YouTube was just about middling along, I had, you know, both a subscriber, but also a YouTuber in his own right, so I knew he could edit, offered to like, hey, do you want me to edit your videos? We can work out some form of rate later. I'll edit a video for free, and if you like it, we can do something. The fact that he was like, oh yeah, I'll just edit a video, and then we can see how it goes from there, that was a much better thing than if he said, okay, so I need $20 now, this edit will take me maybe, you know, 1.5 to 2 hours, so $30, and then if you don't like it, well, I mean, I've spent the time anyway. So like, if that was the attitude going forwards, I wouldn't have paid $30, because, you know, my videos make on average, I mean, nowadays it's very different because we're in a big boom on YouTube. Thank you everyone for, but you know, the average video on my channel, if it gets 10,000 views, you know, maybe I make $15 to $20, paying $30 a video, you know, you can do the maths right now, that would have been a loss. That would have been a terrible business decision to make at the time. So I was like, oh yeah, we can work out this later. If you like the edits, that's good. We can work it out later. And yeah, like the funny thing is at the time, I was in a big never outsource to anyone. It's so much effort to like give someone your video files, to give them feedback, then to get them back. I was like, why would I pay money to do something which I can do myself? It takes a lot of time. And that's why I didn't do it for the longest time until he offered, and I figured, let's give this a whirl. And although I sent him like a video every like 2 or 3 weeks from then on outwards, maybe a year ago, I just realized like, okay, let's, you know, we're going to increase the amount we give him, and we're going to give him a bunch more videos. Like, you know, if you don't know, I pay my editor. He is paid for his job, and that amount increases when he works on something big, like the no food video, which is, I think he said it's like 20 hours worth of editing. It's one of the biggest things we've ever worked on together. Like, we work on a lot of big stuff together, and for those big projects, he, is paid more than he was before, and every single year I try to increase the amount I give him, and it's a situation that all developed that wouldn't have happened if he'd been like, oh yeah, I want this amount from the get-go, and it might sound like, well, you're a heartless monster for not just paying random people that, but like, think of it from my position. Why would I pay someone to do something I can do myself is a piece of logic that everyone has in their head. Why, like paying a whole person that, especially if you work for a real company, you have to actually give them all these different things that come along with it, because those things are mandated if you live in most modern day states. Why would you pay all this money for something you're not sure that you even need? And that is why, in my opinion, you should be not necessarily excited to work for free, but if you're in a rare niche field, then saying never work for free is just a way to make the existing players much better. Because if everyone legally has to charge at least $30 to work for art in an hour, who are they going to hire? They're going to hire the people who have got 10 years of experience, who have done this for so long, or are they going to hire the person who's never done anything but is really excited? And it's like, saying you have to charge this amount all the time, I'm sure it's well-intentioned, but it means that the existing players in the game get much bigger. And I have a story of that one too, actually, because back in the day, if you don't know, I ran a Flash game website. I've shown off, like, these are the Flash games I made a while ago. I had a Flash game website. I think I was 14 at the time. I don't know. It was like 9 years ago now. So I used to run a Flash game website. It was, again, one of the ways I was trying to make money. I think I made like $30 total on it. It was a bad use of my time. But I was like, okay, we're going to make some investments in this, because I used the writing money to kind of be like, okay, let's get a big advertisement going. So I was like, let's try and get a game made, like a unique game just for this website. And I spoke to a lot of people, and their first thing they'd say going forwards was like, okay, if you want a game, it's going to take me 20 hours. It's going to be $35 an hour minimum. And, that's just the minimum we charge over here. And it's like, so $700 minimum for like the bare minimum game that someone can make in Flash. And it was like, I don't have that amount. Like, that was so much more than I could even conceive of at that time. That was like so many months worth of what I would have to, like had spent my, like have worked for. That's even more than what I spent buying my entire recording setup eventually, so that I could give YouTube a little bit of fun. Well, the idea that like spending $700 was unrealistic, and I was like, okay, is there any way we can like cut as much of this out as possible, and we can, you can do anything you want to make this a more fun project for you, and so on and so forth. And it was like, no, $700, that's the minimum for anything going on here. You need at least 20 hours of my time, and it's kind of insulting to ask for less. And it's like, okay, I've insulted you because I don't have enough money to pay your fee, and this would happen no matter who I spoke to about the same thing. They'd always say, oh yeah, at least $35. Some people would say it's 30 hours, some would say 40, some would say 20. The smallest one was like, okay, I'll see what I could put together in 3 hours. Here's an example. And it was the worst, like, non-functional game in the world. And it's like, okay, if you have a price floor, it works really well for people who are price insensitive, but it means that, again, I was trying to be the little guy, tried to build a relationship, tried to work from scratch. For those sorts of people, it just doesn't work, then it doesn't go anywhere. And I'm not really mad about it. Like, okay, those people valued their time, it was good, but it meant there was no way for anyone to, charge them. Anyone who couldn't afford that much to get in the market couldn't find someone who was just new to the skill and wanted to, have like their first, kind of thing go on, and like it wouldn't be so good, but they'd do it for less per hour as an exchange. That was a thing that was just not able to happen. And yeah, the reason I tell you this whole story is because it sucks when there is a price floor and a price ceiling in a market. And, the reality is I think like minimum wage is one of the few price floors that seems to have a lot more good than bad. But then at the same time, it means, well, that means you have to work for free, or you have to be worth that thing. And although I'm not saying feel like you're worth less than whatever the minimum is, but in some industries, there are so many people, you have to stand out somehow. You have to be able to show that you're great, and getting a lot of experience is one of the best ways to do so. This is something I did before I could start writing. I had to make samples, which I obviously, no one was paying me to make random samples of things. You can have a lot more fun with the things you do for free though, because that's kind of some of the trade-off. Like, you don't get paid, but you're doing something for experience. You should be getting, you should be getting connected. You should be getting all these different things. And in a lot of industries, that's how it does work. So yeah, the whole, are you working for free, or, are you being exploited, or should you be paid the full amount? You should be paid the full amount, but worst case, if you do work for free, it's better for you. It might be worse for the people who are already established, but I think when you're new to something and you're passionate and you really care, use that passion as your advantage. Don't let people say, oh no, your passion isn't allowed to be an advantage. You've got to charge what we charge and we'll be better at that rate. That just sounds like a terrible example of something. Anyway, so the one thing you have that you can compete on when you're new and eager to learn is your price, and it sucks if someone says you can't use your price as competition. I just wanted to say that as like yeah, this is just the reality of how it can be. We can make a system without that, but the current system has that in. Again, understanding the current system, understanding how it's worked, at least, again, in my limited experience, I've done a lot of freelancing stuff online. It's going to be very different if you're, again, a lawyer doing some internship at a big company, like, yeah, different situation. But if you're in a field of the arts, of the creativeness, which I'm not a creative person, but I've somehow worked in creative industries my entire life. I just realized, like, oh yeah, I did a lot of writing, and I also own my own games website, and like I owned a business website like 10 years ago, the advertisement one. But after that, it's been like, oh yeah, then I wrote some game guides, then I've made YouTube videos. Apparently, it's a weird world we live in. It's a world so weird that you're currently watching a man, just place some grass in the Nether and then literally watch it grow. You managed to sit through 39 minutes, just under 40 minutes now, of Toycat watching grass grow on the Nether. Did you enjoy it? Did you feel like this was good content? I hope you did, because if you did, you can always like this video and let me know. Share if you liked it. And no, for real, I like doing these like live stream replacements. Whenever I'm not here, I do a bit of a podcast. So if you like your quality time with Toycat, we can talk about some real stuff. And again, I feel like every now and then we dive into something that's like, oh, someone might say that's political, but this isn't politics. This is just the system we would like to build, we can disagree on, but I feel like we should always agree on the system we have right now. If you don't believe that you're watching this video on youtube.com, if you think, oh no, this video is being beamed in my eyes from the aliens in outer space, unless you are an alien in outer space where this is being beamed to you. But if you believed that, then we wouldn't be able to have a constructive, piece of feedback, conversation about how to improve YouTube. We can't improve YouTube if you think that this video is being beamed to you via some alien satellite somewhere. And yeah, that's why I just wanted to say thank you for watching. Thank you for being on the same page with me about whatever else. And if you did all enjoy this video, you can like it and let me know. If you really liked it, you can share it and really let me know. And you can subscribe if you're new around here, because that would really show me who's the best at the thing. I feel like we might have gone a bit rambling there somewhere, so give me some feedback. Like, did we dive into an issue, like reiterate so many times I wasn't clear maybe? Let me know using your comment words, because that's a thing that I like to read sometimes. And just in case you are curious about this whole background, like why am I terraforming the Nether, it's a big project. Like, I make these big project videos maybe once a month, where I do a month worth of survival. I put it into one big video, and I'm hoping that one will be finished in the next few days. It's not done yet, but let's hope that it gets done soon. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Goodbye.